Fianna Force is a game changer, and I hope other theme parks are watching because they should be taking notes. This is the brand new Vekoma suspended thrill coaster that opened up at Emerald Park in Ireland. It's only the second one of its kind after Hals Überkopf at Tripsdrill in Germany. That ride made its debut in 2020, and don't get me wrong, it was fun, but this is far and away the superior ride. Vekoma learned from their prototypes, they made improvements to their design, and this is a top-notch roller coaster. In this review, I'm going to describe the ride experience, tell you what you can expect, and hopefully make a case for why your local theme park should get one of these, because I would love to see these pop up all over the world. Now first off, Fianna Force is the anchor of the Tir na Nog section of Emerald Park. It's their most themed area. It's centered around medieval castles, dragons, warriors. It's really cool. When I visited, it was clearly still a bit of a work in progress. Some areas were looking a lot better than others. I'm just glad they managed to get their new attractions up and running. If the theming's gonna take a little bit longer to get finished, I totally get it. I look forward to one day seeing it when it's done. But Fianna Force is one of two roller coasters in this land, the other one being completely intertwined with the layout. It's a Vekoma family boomerang called Quest. And when I say intertwined, I mean there are literally sections where the two tracks are inches away from each other. Where one ride goes over, the other goes under. They are so well integrated. The engineering and design behind this whole thing is remarkable. And that's actually not that different from Hals Überkopf because they got the same combo with the family boomerang as well. But I feel like this was done even better. One thing I particularly liked is that even though Emerald Park is on flat ground, they kind of created their own terrain. They dug out trenches where they put in this stonework to make this like castle walls that the rides then thread through, creating this dynamic terrain. You'll walk over bridges where the track is going directly underneath you and you'll look up and see the spike of the family boomerang or the overbank turns of Fianna Force. The whole Tir na Nog land is just alive. This was easily my favorite section of the park, and Fianna Force was my favorite ride at Emerald Park. Even more so than the massive wind coaster, which was great, don't get me wrong, but this was something special. So let's walk through this ride experience, starting with the queue. The entry path for the ride weaves among the tracks, so you get amazing views like this, where you see Quest going directly over Fianna Force. The majority of the queue, though, is indoors. Right before you enter the station, there's this big old room that's set up like an armory. There you'll see projections where one of the workers is telling stories. He talks about this fire-breathing dragon that's been attacking, and many brave warriors have tried to defeat him, but they failed, except for one. He defeated him in a fierce battle and was awarded leader of Nafina. Now it's our turn to prove our worth to the king. To help us along the way, they forged us some magical armor to protect us, and that is our restraints. So it's a clever little story. You'll see a bunch of shields, spears, and axes all around you. Then when you get to the station, that's a bit more of a lighter theme. It's definitely not the biggest station in the world, that's for sure. When we went to Emerald Park, they ran Fianna Force on one train for most of the day, but later on, after it got busier, they did add a second train, which was a pleasant sight to see. All they have to do to check your restraints is pull down on that lap bar. There's no seatbelt or anything. It's an extremely open-feeling vehicle. You know, on most suspended or inverted roller coasters, there's an over-the-shoulder restraint. So it's refreshing to be taking these inversions while feeling completely exposed up top. It's a drastically different sensation from a B&M invert, which is why actually I wouldn't really draw a comparison to those ride models that B&M does. If anything, this is just a more extreme version of the Vekoma family suspended coasters. They have models all over the world, including one at Dollywood, Energylandia, Far Up Summerland, etc. If you like those rides but are looking for something that's a step up, that's where this comes in. My first impressions of Hals Überkopf were that it's a nice family thrill ride, not super positive G heavy, also had a shake at times, all things that I was hoping would be fixed with the second one, and that's exactly what happened here. Fianna Force is actually pretty intense. It all starts with a right-hand turn out of the station. You'll start up your 102-foot-tall lift hill. That is 4 feet taller than Hals Überkopf. And we crest over into a pretty steep first drop. So unlike the B&M inverts, there's no pre-drop where you let off the chain. You just roll straight into this thing, staring at the ground, and then at the last second, banking to the right. You'll pass through one of those trenches that I was talking about, and this is a pretty intense moment. I was surprised just how many G's this thing pulled. According to the Ride Forces app, the most we hit was 3.8. That is pretty impressive. I'm not sure what the max is on Hals Überkopf, but I guarantee you this is more. The first half of this ride keeps to some pretty strong positives. As you're thrown through this trench, you then rise up into this large overbanked inversion. It feels more like a drawn-out bank turn, but I guess technically it's an angle that does qualify it as an inversion. So for all intents and purposes, Fianna Force goes upside down 3 times, though I'd say really only 2 of them feel like formal inversions. We'll get to those in a second. So I'd say this big first element, including the entry in and out of it, is the most intense sequence on the Fianna Force, because immediately after that, you're plunging back towards the ground in another trench past some stone walls. This is the second time that we thread underneath Quest. You probably didn't notice the first one. That's actually the bottom of the drop. Just like so slick the way this is integrated. And that's what sends you into your next inversion. This is your first roll, and it does so right above the station for Quest. This is what I would also call our first big near miss on the coaster. This is one of the reasons why I really recommend riding this at some point in the front row, because it is crazy how you just barely dodge out of the way from this station. That station has a pretty open design with no roof. It also means when you're riding Quest about to load, you can look directly up and see the coaster flipping over your head. And interestingly enough, it does so more than once. After that roll, you enter this bank curve that threads underneath the lift hill of Quest. You rise up, level out, and then dip down into the station. You're now directly underneath that roll that you just went through as you flip into your final inversion. And this is a proper 0G roll. It is so floaty. Every new Vekoma that makes its debut just has such a natural progression from one element to the next. It's very impressive, but sometimes with a couple of their other rides, I actually think it might be a little too natural, where you don't have enough of a force change, where it doesn't feel like two distinct moments. But I would say that is definitely not the case for this ride. The G-forces really fluctuate, especially during the second half of the ride. Where the first half was all about the positives, the second half is all about the negatives. But first, getting back to this roll, one thing in particular that I love about it is that as you're rolling over to the left, it actually keeps that momentum as you're exiting, because then it then banks you sharply to the left, flying underneath that first inversion or overbank that you went through after the first drop. You then level out and dip down into what I think is the best sequence on the coaster. It is a series of side-to-side transitions where you then fly underneath Quest, banking to the left, immediately twist then to the right, once again narrowly missing that track. There's a sharp turn on the far side near the station, and then we enter our Airtime hills. Yes, a suspended coaster that sends you up out of your seat. And not just once. It's like 4 times back to back. And they do so with these twists. You'll level out, dip down, rise back up, bank to the side, and then just do that same motion over and over and over again. I compared it to skiing. It feels like you're threading down a mountain. It's just bam, 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 and each time you get some air. On Hal Zuberkopf, it felt like it was trying to do that, but it didn't quite get there. This absolutely gets there. And that's how you end out your sequence. When you hit the brake run, I feel like everyone's just amazed at what they just experienced. It has such a strong layout, and it does all of that while being glass smooth, no matter where you're sitting. When we did Hal Zuberkopf, I thought the front was smooth, but the back had a bit of a shake. This doesn't have that. Vekoma integrated these dampeners into the ride vehicle that just cuts out any sort of vibration. And so that makes these some of the smoothest roller coasters you can buy. And I think that's part of the reason why this is a big crowd pleaser. You got the positives, you got the negatives, you got the crazy transitions, fantastic pacing, a smooth ride. It's an all-around win. And I think it was just a perfect fit for Emerald Park because it's also a big change of pace from Cuchulainn. This is extreme without being too crazy. Like Cuchulainn is all about just tossing you around left and right, and this does so in a completely different way that they just complement each other. The last thing I'll add about Fianna Force before we jump into the final score, ride this a couple times throughout the day. We did most of our rides in the morning and loved it, but then when we came back for our last ride, I was amazed how much it sped up. We were just cooking, flying through these different elements. I was even more so blown away by it. Maybe part of that is due to expectations. I liked Hal Zuberkopf, but I didn't love it. So when this was so much better, I was just like floored. But hopefully I'm not overhyping it for you guys. Again, don't expect it to be like as whippy or as forceful as a B&M invert, because it's not. This is distinctly different. But if I ran a theme park and I was looking for an extreme roller coaster that hangs below the track, I'd probably be more likely to buy this than a B&M invert. Because even though I love those attractions, nowadays you just can't trust that you can buy a B&M that's going to be glass smooth like you used to. And I'm just not a big fan of B&M's vests. I love that this is a lap bar only, and never before could you get airtime on a B&M invert. I feel like this just opens the doors for so much more possibility. Plus, when you get the combo with a family boomerang, it's just a slam dunk for a park. I love one of these a little bit closer to home. But don't get me wrong, I will be back one day to Ireland to experience this again. So for Fianna Force's final score, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 because, in my opinion, this is the best roller coaster Vekoma has built that hangs riders below the track. Better than any of their suspended looping coasters or suspended family coasters. I would take this over a lot of B&M inverts, and I really feel like this roller coaster is just a game changer. It did things I didn't even know were possible on a ride like this. And if this was that much better than Hal Zuberkoff, I can't wait to see what comes next after Fianna Force. So let me know down in the comments below if you've had the opportunity to experience this over at Emerald Park in Ireland, if you agree with the points that I brought up, and of course stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and we'll see you next time.